Make the magic happen. Good morning. Welcome to the Friday live show. I am your host, Adam Quiney. I'm just waiting for it to load here. I'm going to do the live pouring of the tea. Let's get this. Let's do this the way we like to do it. We just make sure that it's showing up on Facebook. People have been telling me lately. One person said that it's weird. Oh no, that's showing up there. So it's working on my side. It's even giving me captions, which I love. Apparently, while we pour this tea live, here's the teapot. Here's the mug. Contact. Today we're quaffing a bit of Pacific Sun. That's orange and vanilla black tea. Sold by this company. It's not even really well, I guess it's a company. It's a store more than a company here in Victoria called Special Teas, which is not the most unique, or like that name doesn't have the most cachet. I guess I should have a sip to start us off proper. Hello, first viewer. You are the first viewer, the first follower. I'm going to find you a link to, I love this video, Leadership Lessons from Dancing Guy, Derek Sivers. Where's that link? Here it is. This is a great little video about being the first follower, Derek Sivers. I don't know how this moment happened. I can't remember where this, I don't know the full details. I'd learned them a while back. But if you watch this video, it's really fascinating because it's at some kind of concert or whatever. And there's one guy just dancing like a maniac. Hey, Jess, good morning. Do you prefer Jess or Jessica? That's important. Let me know. Anyhow, this guy's dancing like a maniac, and Derek Sivers must have found this video and he's talking about it. And then what happens is slowly a second person comes and starts dancing with him, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then like 10 more people come and join, and they're all dancing in the weird way that this guy's dancing. And then over time, over the course of about like 10 minutes, or maybe it's just 5, a huge crowd, like everyone runs in and starts dancing with this one guy. It's a fascinating, like, I guess, piece of sociology to watch, to see it come in. Morning, Anna, or good evening. Listening today, not commenting much because you're creating sushi. Is that what I see? You're creating sushi? That's fun. I'm excited that I get to be a part of that with you, get to hang out while you're making sushi. So anyhow, that video I highly recommend. It's really fascinating and it's fun. And Derek's kind of a cool guy. He's got some quippy stuff to say and share. Let's top this up. Well, what do I want to talk before I dive into the real stuff? This is the last Friday before we're back proper to the grind of my life. My life's a big grind. It's not really. Vacation time this month has not been. I'm just going to turn this fan up a little bit. It's quite hot. Hi, there we go. Vacation time this month has been quite low key because we're still on the tail end of the pandemic, and I'm on the way out. They just got our second shot. I'll probably be getting an email to schedule my second shot soon, and then we're looking to the fall and the winter and beyond that, and are like, holy crap, there's so much travel already booked. November, I've got about 3 or maybe 3 different trips back to back to back. I'll be in, where am I going? I have an annual trip I take with all my friends. It was canceled last year, where we go to usually one of the Gulf Islands around here, one of the smaller islands. I live on an island, and we'll be on a smaller island. And so we've got that. Then I'll be flying to Arizona, where I'm going to be at a cowboy dude ranch with a bunch of people from a group I'm a part of called Metal, which is going to be interesting because there's a bunch of apparently gun enthusiasts in that group, and I'm not really interested in guns whatsoever, and strongly believe in gun regulation and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting. I'm sure it'll be really cool too. And the opportunity there is to spend time with people rather than with their principles. Spend time with the person rather than the principles that they espouse. And then from there, I fly to Florida, where we're going to be doing the next peer-led retreat, which is where a bunch of people that I love and am in practice with in various capacities get together every year and um, bring our work to each other. So here's what I've been working on. Here's what's really working for me. This is what I've been teaching. And we kind of create an opportunity for hanging out, being with people we love, and deepening ourselves. So all kind of cool stuff. And already I'm like, holy mackerel, that's a lot of travel. December, I'll be in Costa Rica back at Rhythmia for another ceremony, another ayahuasca ceremony. And then I think what else is there? I think in October, we're scheduled to be traveling through possibly Jordan. And then we're going to include Greece and maybe England or something like that, make some stops to see some of our friends in Europe. So there's a lot of travel all of a sudden. It's like Jess feels more enduring. Okay, great. So we're going to be traveling a lot, and it's interesting just noticing like the overwhelm that starts to create in me already. I'm like, holy mackerel, that's a lot of travel. What the heck are we going to do about that? Going to be with it. That's what we're going to do about it. I was dusting my office and I came across this book again. Oh, that doesn't show up at all, does it? So anyway, there you go. Conversations with God, an Uncommon Dialogue. This book is fascinating. The I guess I should show you the spine test. You can't see too. Oh, there you go. So not too much, but really this whole book is a phenomenal book. It's part of a series of 3. I've only read the first one by a man named Neil Donald Walsh. If you are interested in kind of getting into more of a spiritual angle, I highly recommend this book. If you want to deepen your relationship with spirit, I read this during my first year when I was being trained as a coach. This was, Anna, this is probably something you're actually reading right now or supposed to. This was one of the required readings during our spirituality weekend. And I was actually traveling through France. Bay and I were on a trip in Paris when this was the book that I was reading, which was beautiful. I would be on these trains traveling through the French countryside, which is gorgeous, reading this book. And the way this book got written is that Neil Donald Walsh, the author, I'm just going to see if I can find really quickly how this got created, because I think he mentions it right at the start. So he, I think he says in this first page, if not. Yeah, he says, I was very unhappy during this period. I'd been in the habit for years of writing my thoughts down in letters, which I usually never delivered. This time, rather than another letter to another person I imagined to be victimizing me, I thought I'd go straight to the source, straight to the greatest victimizer of them all. I decided to write a letter to God. It was a spiteful, passionate letter, full of confusions, contortions, and condemnations, and a pile of angry questions. Why wasn't my life working? What would it take to get it to work? Why could I not find happiness in relationships? Was the experience of adequate money going to elude me forever? And finally, and most emphatically, what had I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? To my surprise, as I scribbled out the last of my bitter, unanswerable questions and prepared to toss my pen aside, my hand remained poised over the paper, as if held there by some invisible force. Abruptly, the pen began moving on its own. I had no idea what I was about to write, but an idea seemed to be coming, so I decided to flow with it. Out came, and then this is how the book begins, but what the pen wrote, or what was written as him or through him. Do you really want an answer to all these questions, or are you just venting? I'm going to read you a little bit more before I put this down. I blinked, and then my mind came up with a reply. I wrote that down too. His reply was, both. I'm venting, sure, but if these questions have answers, I'm sure as hell like to hear them. And then the next answer comes from his pen. You are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't it be nice to be sure as heaven? And I wrote, what is that supposed to mean? Before I knew it, I had begun a conversation, and I was not writing so much as taking dictation. So, good morning, Lydia. Nice to have you here. So this whole book was written that way. Neil Donald Walsh sat down and wrote out questions and then entered into a conversation with God. And or spirit or universe or space blueberry muffin or whatever you want to call it, however you want to relate to God. I like that term. It's simple. For some people, that'll be too loaded and they're not ready to enter into the conversation at that space. And so I was one of these people for quite a long time. Spirit can be a little easier, a little more secular maybe, or the universe or life energy or whatever it is, doesn't really matter. So it's easy reading this book to sort of think, what a load of bullshit. Hey, Tommy, good morning. Guy sounds like a wackadoodle. Or this guy just made this all up and wrote it as he wrote it. And that's totally fine. You can read it through that lens. I love the idea that it was created the way he shared it, and certainly had moments of writing and even writing software and stuff like that where I felt like something was being spoken as me, not so much through me, but like coming forward as me, life and God unfolding as me. And the more I've deepened my own spiritual practice, the more that's the experience of life that I have. And even if that's all nonsense to you, I think this is a phenomenal book. There's so much goodness in here that really kind of speaks to our the human condition. So I'm going to just read one of the places that I've bookmarked. I don't really know. Let's see here. So he says, what if you don't want the thing you were looking at to disappear? What if you're looking at something you don't want it to disappear? God says, you should always want it to you should always want it to. There's nothing in your reality to hold on to. Yet if you do choose the illusion of your life over ultimate reality, you may simply recreate it, just as you created it to begin with. In this way, you may have in your life what you choose to have and eliminate from your life what you no longer wish to experience. Here's the part I bookmarked. Yet never resist anything. If you think that by your resistance you will eliminate something, think again. You only plant it more firmly in place. Have I not told you all thought is creative? That's not the best. I think you need some surrounding context for that. Anyhow, this is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. I'm going to put the link to the book here in the comments. Conversations. I think it's A Conversation with God, isn't it? Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. Does he have an E in his name? Nope, but he has a C. He's got a sneaky C in there. There we go. So as I was dusting, this book was kind of like there, saying like, hey, pick me up and read me, which I took kind of like, oh, there's another message from Spirit for me, and just have been flipping through it and love this book. It might be time to read the remaining. There's 2 more after this first one. He's written 3. And my friend really enjoyed listening to the audiobooks. Apparently the audiobooks have the person speaking for God in these conversations alternates between male and female to give you kind of like this more whole, bigger, grander vision of the Spirit speaking through all of us. So that's another option if you like audiobooks. All right, so that's cool. That's a good book. Highly recommend that. Should we get to the topics, guys? Is that where we should go? Guys, y'all? Seems like a good move, doesn't it? Let's have another sip of tea before we start. Quick update on Who Do You Think You Are, which is the book I've been writing. I got all my edits back finally about a week ago, and there is a lot of them. Not because the book's not good or anything like that, but because as is often the case, there's a lot of repetition in certain parts, and there's parts where even as I was writing it, I was like, I just need to get words on paper. This isn't my best. We can come back to this, which I often find is the best way to write. Write like a furious storm, just dump stuff onto the page, darken the page, as my I guess I'll call him my friend, mentor, someone I love, Steve Chandler used to say, or still says. And so darken the page and then come back to it, edit, create meaning out of the chaos that's emerged on the page. So we have to start with chaos. Writing is a very much kind of like a feminine and masculine process. We begin with the chaos. That's the feminine energy. I'm not saying women are chaotic. I'm saying that the feminine energy, the polarity, these sort of primordial energies, chaos comes first and then order comes second. So that's how the writing process, that's really how most art works. First, we allow the chaos to emerge, and then we bring structure to it so that it can have an order to it. And then in doing so, we create order. If you try to start with the order first, you'll find that it's like trying to start a fire without a spark, or like with wet wood, or just rubbing sticks together. There's nothing there. It doesn't work. So we have to begin with the chaos. That applies for all art. If you're unwilling to put your chaos into the world, it's hard to actually have momentum pick up for you. So I thought initially about 2 weeks of editing. My estimate is probably 3, maybe as much as 4, probably closer to 3. And then we'll go through a round where someone's going to go through and check all the grammar. I'm still estimating probably from here about 6 to 8 weeks. So what are we in? June, end of July, end of August. So probably around September is when we'll have this starting to be ready. Yeah, so that's the update. Let's talk about these topics. We're going to start with Heather. Thank you, Heather, for your topic. Heather says, how do you know? Can you talk about getting when you're serving as opposed to when you're pleasing? And I was like, what do you mean? And then she provided some elaboration. So she says, sometimes I can find myself confused with, am I doing more to please someone as opposed to serving them a particular way? And so she's saying, like, there's times when she's sort of listening to get them, but she's afraid she's holding back what she's thinking or seeing. And so she's kind of getting them, but maybe there's like a step further to go. And does that mean she's trying to be nice, that she's trying to like keep herself comfortable by holding back and not just dumping something on someone? And she's saying sort of, I find, I question myself as to whether I'm staying over here or just listening to them because it's more comfortable to them or to myself, or am I serving them by just getting them? Like, how do I, walk this tension? So this tension, first of all, is kind of at the heart of, well, it's in those kind of tensions that really the work happens. Let's try to think of some other versions that have that same kind of tension, other places we could see that. So a really good one might be a leader who's experiencing the tension between trusting what they see and making a decision from that place, which is essential, right? We've all been around those leaders that they want to do everything by consensus. So you sit down at a meeting and every single person at the meeting has to be heard, which is not necessarily bad, but then, okay, now what? And then it's like, well, what about this? And then and like it takes 50 years for a decision to be reached. So there's a point where the leader has to trust what they feel and make a decision. So that's one side. And then that's in tension with the leader doing their own work, which sometimes means letting go of their own certainty, letting go of what they have decided they're right about. And then, how do we walk that tension between me just being blind and making decisions and telling myself I'm right versus never ever trusting myself? So there's another example of that kind of tension in my relationship, and I think in a lot of relationships. Here's another version of that tension, which would be where I want to make sure that I'm not just unilaterally deciding for Bay and I, for my partner. I want to make sure that I'm being responsible, that I'm being caring, loving, and that I am not just the sort of man that's like, fuck you, the decision's made, bye. So on the one hand, I'm really committed to hearing my partner and to recognizing that there's like a righteousness that can show up in me that can be in opposition to what my partner might feel. And my partner might be like, you're always doing this. And I might be like, fuck you, you're always doing that. And I know I'm not. So that's where I'd become closed. There's no opportunity in our relationship. There's no intimacy that's available. But that's also in tension with there being a point I've noticed where someone, and it tends to be me, doesn't always have to be me, but someone has to put their foot down. So I'll give you an example of this one. Sometimes what can happen is Bay and I will get into an argument, and in the argument, we're both triggered, meaning our survival mechanism, our shadow is activated and it's doing what it's doing. So mine is like being very logical and rational and you're wrong and here's why and blah, blah, blah. And Bayes is doing whatever her version of that is back at me. And that has us just be in a spiral. And so what tends to happen in those conversations is I ultimately want to be like, fuck it, I'm gone. I'm done with this. You're being crazy, woman. And then Bay will clutch at me and like her shadow will try to bring me back in. And so one of the ways it's really easy to hook me back in is if you start pointing out how I'm not doing my work or I'm not willing to be responsible, because that is just something I border on hyper responsibility to the point of irresponsibility. I'll, rather than being responsible for my own needs or whatever, I will get stuck in, oh, I've got to be responsible here. I've got to do the thing. So what'll happen is from there, I'm like, oh, she's right. She's probably right. Like, and almost certainly she is on some level. There's probably more for me to take a look at here, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to just run away, et cetera, et cetera. And so the tension that exists here is, on the one hand, I'll stay in that conversation forever and we're just in a swirl together. Nothing's going to make a difference. And at the same time, one of us has to put our foot down. And putting our foot down looks like me saying, hey, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere. We're going to end this conversation. And often, first of all, I'm probably not going to be at my most artful doing that because I'm triggered. So there's a little bit of fuck you in that, almost certainly. And then Bay's shadow from her trigger will be like, you just don't want to have a conversation about it. You're just blah, 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 blah. You know, she'll do whatever she does, which is going to then hook me back into it. And the tension for me, or the place, is at some point I have to be like, no, maybe you're right. Maybe there is more for me here. Maybe I'm not being responsible. But on some level, I'm clear that we're in a swirl and we're not getting anywhere in this conversation. So even though you're probably right that I'm being irresponsible, I'm putting my foot down because one of us has to. So there's always a tension between those two places, a tension between having making a decision in relationship and trusting ourselves, and staying in the swirl and not just being unilateral, not acting in such a way that eliminates or precludes the possibility of relationship and intimacy and being with another person. So that's three places where this kind of tension exists. And really the heart of leadership and the heart of intimacy, and I would say those two are inextricably entwined. The heart of intimacy and leadership exists in that tension. So what we typically want to do as humans is we don't want to be in that tension, because it's in the tension that we experience discomfort, and it's in the tension that there's no right answer. So instead, what we want are clear rules to follow. Give me the rules to follow. This is why dating is so fraught these days, is because we're at one point all very like, I don't want to transgress a boundary, so I really want to honor someone's no. But at the same time, a relationship set up by clear, boxed in rules has no chemistry to it. There's no spark. Again, you don't have any of the chaos. And in chaos, there has to be the opportunity for things not going the way they're supposed to go, because otherwise it wouldn't be chaos. So for a lot of this stuff, like, you know, in the workplace, people want more and more rules, and then don't understand why, like, their culture feels dead. It feels like dry, dead wood. There's no life in it. The reason is because all of those rules take away any possibility for the chaotic nature of life. Likewise, all of these places where we experience tension, what we typically yearn for is certainty. Because with certainty, I know I won't fuck things up. And if I know I won't fuck things up, then I don't have to develop some kind of level of trust in myself. I can just follow the rule, and that's all there is to it. And I will be safe, and I will be good, and I will, okay, good. I know I'm doing things the right way. What that'll give you is a life lived the right way, but not a life lived as life. That's the key distinction right there. You'll have a life lived the right way as opposed to life lived as life. Life lived as life is not, you could probably even, that might be redundant. It might just be like, as opposed to a life lived, life done the right way, as opposed to life lived. In any event, that's a lot of setup. I'm going to come to answering Heather's question in just a sec, but like, I think that's an important thing for us to speak to in the broader context, which is that that tension is really hard for us to be with. And remember last week we were talking about how transformation and transformational breakthroughs are often about allowing. rather than doing, rather than getting answers. So this tension, anytime you find yourself in one of these two tensions and you're trying to resolve the tension, that's a great North Star for you. What that experience of trying to resolve the tension is inviting you to take on in your life is, rather than resolve the tension, just sit with it. Be in that tension. And just like, oh, can I feel this tension without resolving it? That's where our transformation happens. So there's tons of places where this happens. It happens constantly and continuously. And what occurs, what typically goes on when people create change in their lives, what they end up doing is resolving the tension one way or the other. So they either create a bunch of rules to follow, so then they don't have to have that tension, because they're like, rule says do this, I do that. The person's like, but I'm left out in the cold. Well, I'm following the rule, sweetie, sorry. Or I don't know, whatever a more appropriate word than sweetie would be. Or they resolve the tension the other way and say, fuck it, I just do what I do. And then they don't have to, hey, I'm upset you did that. Well, I'm just doing what I'm doing, so you can blah, 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 blah. So they resolve that tension rather than sitting in it. And as we sit in it, what tends to happen is we slowly but surely will create transcendence, which has us create a new, grander experience for ourselves, a bigger belief that allows for more stuff and that doesn't have these two things be in tension with one another. For example, in like, well, I'm not going to try to go too far down because I already feel like we're kind of off-piste for a lot of this stuff. I want to come back to answering Heather's question. But all that to say, it's a beautiful question Heather's asking, and that tension is so critical for us to sit in, and that's where the breakthrough lies. Lydia, let's see what you wrote here. You said, thanks for bringing us this book, Conversations with God. I had the pleasure of meeting Neil years ago and singing at his event. Oh, so cool. In Vancouver. I didn't know you sang, Lydia. That's amazing. Wow, what an honor that must have been. Where was it held, and what was his event like? I'd love to know more about it. There's another book. Let's pull these off. So here's a book I really enjoy called Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton. This one, the spine looks pretty good. A bunch of tabs there. This is a great book because people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to be radically honest. And they think that means like telling the truth to people, not holding myself back. Fuck you is what Brad says. Fuck you. Before you have any hope of being radically honest to those people, you've got to come and face your own bullshit. You've got to confront that and start to create a degree of honesty internally that currently does not exist for you. And then people will be like, whoa, what are you talking about? And Brad would say, trust me. And your insistence that you are honest with yourself is in the way of your actual honesty. That's the first layer of dishonesty. So this is a great book. And he and Neil Donald Walsh together wrote Honest to God, which is really neat because they ended up sitting next to each other on an airplane and started talking. And we're like, hey, you're sharing the same stuff I am. And so from that, they started to chat and get into email conversations back and forth. So that's really neat. Hey, Abril. Is that how I say your name? Abril? Abril Mondragon. Tell me what, so in French, that would be an accent aigu, but I don't know how that would alter the sound of an O. I know in French, an E with an accent aigu sounds like an A. Été, summer, two accent aigus. Accent grave is the other one, and I never know what that does. I just say the word the way it looks, and it usually seems to be right. I think accent grave is just mostly to be kind of fancy. They're like, this word looks a little, it needs a little je ne sais quoi. Let's put an accent grave. Okay. I want to come to Heather's topic, but I'm curious if any of you, when you're in a foreign country and you're speaking English to someone, put on a little bit of an accent when you're speaking it, like in their accent, hoping it'll sound a little more understandable to them. Does anyone else do that? I remember when I was in Quebec I must have been grade 7, so quite young. I was in French immersion. I'm fluent in French. I was in French immersion and we were in Quebec, and towards the end of it, everything I spoke was with an accented Quebecois style English speaking, because I thought I guess my body was just like, oh, that's going to be easier for them to understand because it's accented the way they speak. That'll make more sense. I imagine that sounds a little patronizing to them. What up, Heather is here, Lady Heather. We're just, I've just provided a ton of prefacing, so you're just in time for me to answer your question. So now that we've laid out the larger framework of like these places where there's tension and that our human desire is to resolve the tension rather than sit in it, we're still back to like, great, so I'm sitting in the tension, but how do I know what there is to do in these moments where Avril, something like moon dragon, mon dragon. In French, it would be like my dragon. Avril. Avril. Okay, cool. What ethnicity, internationality, what nationality is your? It almost looks like I knew a guy named Dragon. Where was he from? And I think he spelt it similar to you. I can't remember. Anyhow, it almost looks a little Slavic, but it's not Cyrillic, so it can't be that. Anyhow, let's talk about Heather's particular tension. I want to get them. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to be with them. And on the other hand, now there's something I'm holding back. And so let me just bring up something here. Yeah, we're going to bring it up this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to reference a document here called the Principles of Service, which I've hopefully opened. Yep, there we go. My computer's just a little slower. And then I'm going to find a link so all of you can follow along. Whoops, didn't want to do it that way. I got to click here. I've got to load this up. We'll put this in the comments in just one sec. I should have had this prepared. Shame on me. My bad, guys. I'm going to have a sip of tea while we wait for me to load this. There we go. We've effectively logged in. So the Principles of Service is something I wrote. It's a piece of content I created specifically in support of this. Oh, beautiful. It looks like I don't have a link to it. So that's just perfect. Oh, wait, I know where I've got it. I posted on Facebook just recently, so we can do it that way. Here we go. If I scroll down, we can find it this way. Here we are. We want to click that. We want to wait for it to load. Click that again. Didn't do what I wanted it to do. Copy link address. Go over here. Put it in the comments. Paste. Okay, there you go. Okay, so there's a big, giant, ugly formatted link. But if you click that, it'll take you to these Principles of Service, which is really what we're going to use as kind of our guidelines. So these are principles and guidelines rather than rules, which mean like a rule tells you what to do, and then you don't have to sit. There's no, a rule is more prescriptive of the action there is for you to take. A principle is kind of like a base piece of foundation. It's a place to start from. So if we look at these, you can see like one, if you're not clear, these are the principles, right? This is principles to follow to ensure you're actually being of service to someone. So one, if you're not clear if someone wants your support, asking them directly and honoring their answer is serving them. So that's our baseline. I don't know if this person wants what I have. Maybe I should ask them. So there's the very start of the answer for you, Heather. Like it sounds like you're listening and you hear something for them, but you're not clear as to whether that would serve them or not. You don't know, like, oh, what would actually serve them? I've got something for them, but I don't know if that's more my stuff or them. And so what these principles are designed to do is get you out of yourself and over there with them to continue honoring the person across from you. Principle number 2 says asking someone to see what would support them and then honoring their answer, that was a weird way to say that. Honoring their answer is serving them. So would it support you right now for me to just listen? Or, I mean, I've got something. Are you interested in that? So that's an opportunity for you to serve. One, you serve them simply by asking that question because you are checking in with them. You are giving them the opportunity to be clear about what would serve them. I'm just going to look at a few more of these. You don't have to constantly know that what you are providing is of service. When you realize you are no longer sure if you are serving someone, checking back in with them is providing service. So you can simply ask like, hey, it seems like in this moment, I've got something, but it doesn't occur to me like that might be the best thing, but I want to check in. Do you want to hear that? I'm not so sure. And I really, I'm happy just to hear what you've got to just listen because it's interesting to me. So again, we're checking it in with them. And in what Heather's describing, Heather, what you put here, what I'm present to is a lot of you trying to figure it out unilaterally. What I mean by unilaterally is you're trying to figure the answer out inside your head on your own. There's someone in a conversation with you, and then there's a second conversation that's happening just up here with you. They don't get to be a part of that. The conversation's like, what do I do? What's the right thing to do? What do they need me to be? I wonder how they need me to be. Do they want to hear what I have to say? Right? So the trouble with that energy, if you want to think of it this way, is that it just stays in a loop here. There's no opportunity to loop the other person in. So this is where we kind of get stuck a lot of the time in most of these sort of relationships. And this is why leadership and intimacy are so entwined. It's because you'll notice as you go through the principles of service that so much of it is really about bringing the other person back into the conversation and co-creating that conversation with them. So when we get into a conversation with them, when we loop them in, suddenly we don't have to figure it out. We can just ask the other person. Now we tend to avoid doing this because we're afraid that they're going to be like, no, I don't want what you have. Or they're going to say, I do want what you have. And then we're going to tell them, and then they're going to get upset. That's part of intimacy. If you're in a relationship where there's never any conflict, I assert that there's not a lot of intimacy in your relationship. And the reason that I can say that with such certainty is because you don't have to look very far internally in your own life to see how much conflict you're constantly in with yourself. So if you bring in another person entirely who's different from you, of course there's going to be conflict. The depth to which you allow yourself to be seen with them is the depth to which conflict will raise and make itself known. And further, conflict is as my counselor used to say, conflict is growth wanting to happen. So every relationship, even the one you're having with the person standing beside you at the bus stop that you've suddenly found yourself in conversation with, there's the opportunity for a greater level of intimacy. And that happens not by like telling them their eyes are beautiful or something like that, but just being willing to share and to bring them into the conversation more and to ask them so that that loop that's going on in your head can be brought to the other person, and then it can actually be resolved. Anytime you're in a loop about trying to figure out what the right thing to do with the person in front of you is, that was weird the way anytime you're in a loop about trying to figure out what to do with the person in front of you, the way you resolve that loop is you bring them in. And then that'll remove it from it can't resolve itself as long as it's inside your head, because there's that's not where it's going to be resolved. It's going to be resolved out there with them. This is also part of why anxiety is so, it's like a perpetual motion machine. Anxiety is trying to figure out the solution to life before we engage with life. And that is impossible. The only way to figure out the only way really to figure out how to be or show up with life is for us to engage with life, and then to sort of go as we go, engage with life. What happened? Oh my God, how do I feel? What's going on? What's the next thing to do? Engage with life, and so on and so forth. So all of these things create these loops that have us going like this, which is kind of the symbol for craziness. That's what they kind of cause. So the way you discover, like the really simple answer in this is, one, it's all there in the principles of service. But I think more importantly, you just engage. You ask the person like, hey, I notice I'm happy to listen, but there is something here, like I'm feeling something here to share with you, and I just want to see if you actually want it. You may not, and that's okay too. We have to be careful a little bit, because anytime you ask someone, anytime ever, or almost like 95% of the time that you tell someone, hey, I've got some feedback for you, are you interested in it? We are trained to say yes. We're not very well trained to like check in with ourselves. Am I open to feedback right now? Is this actually the moment? Would I really be served by this? Do I have the capacity for feedback? I don't know what kind of feedback it is. None of that. We just automatically are like, I should say yes to feedback. I want to be a better person. And then we might get that and we're like, fuck you, because we actually weren't a yes. We just weren't able to identify that. So we do need to be a little, we need to feel into what's there as well. But as a starting point for all of this, I would say asking people always makes this so much easier for us. Heather, you say it's so interesting as this looping in my own head can go on unconsciously. Totally. Yeah, that's one of the gifts of mindfulness. So when we're practicing meditating, we're being mindful. We're not clearing our head of thoughts, or at least I sure as hell aren't. I'm just getting better at noticing the thoughts I'm having rather than being swept away in them. So it's sort of like a train on the tracks running by, and I'm like, that cart's red, that cart's blue, that cart's green, that cart's brown, that cart's red, that cart's brown. Instead of jumping onto the train and then off we go, which tends to be what happens most of the time, is that we have our thoughts, and you're going to have those no matter how hard you try not to. And then we get swept away in it unconsciously, as Heather so aptly puts it. So the first step is to notice, oh, wow, I'm caught in a looping pattern. And then, oh, I gotta come back out here and engage with the world in front of me. That's how we resolve this stuff. Really great question, Heather. Let me know if there's anything, further on that, anything outstanding. So let's go from there to Andrew's question, and then we're going to come to Dave. Yeah, we're going to hit up Andrew's question next. So there's two parts to Andrew's question. I'll read you the whole question, and I'm going to break it down. He says, how do you recognize when the context you're hearing might be off the mark? And then he elaborates. So I've been getting some feedback lately where possibly the context I'm seeing is not the bigger picture. The first thing I'm going to do after this is I'm going to elaborate on what we mean by context, so you get a sense of that. Andrew goes on, it's a bit frustrating because I feel like I'm looking at the context, but it's being reflected back to me that I'm off track. So recognizing when I'm off track and being able to pivot from a different place in the conversation. So first, we're going to talk about what is context as opposed to content. Why is that important in a leadership and a coaching and a transformational conversation? And then we'll actually get to Andrew's question and how you actually work with this. So our context is made up of, but I definitely do have a document for this. Finally, I can post a link to a document. So our context is given to us by three components, and it's kind of you can think of it like it's the water in which you swim, out of which the content of your questions arises. Let me copy this link. Copy. Great. Here's the link to the document that will sort of lay out in much greater detail everything I'm about to share. So you can just TLDR me. You can say, I don't want to listen to this guy. I want to click on that link. Great. So your context is made up of three things. First, your beliefs. So if I believe that you have to work hard to make money, that's a belief. Then the second part of your context is the actions you take as a result of the beliefs you have. So if I have a belief that you have to work hard to make a lot of money, there's a couple or an infinite really number of actions I might take, but some of them might be I figure out what kind of job rewards me for working hard, and then I go get that job and I work really hard, and then I get to have a lot of money and I get to do whatever it is I want to do with a lot of money. That's one set of actions. Another would be, given that I have to work hard to make a lot of money and I don't want to work hard, I'm going to figure out how to be okay with not having a lot of money so that I don't have to work hard. It's important at this point to make clear that we're not aware that our beliefs are just beliefs. And I'll explain why that is in just a second. But for now, take it as given that you don't experience your beliefs about how the world is as beliefs that just exist that you could plug in a new one for. You experience them as the absolute truth of the way the world is and the way you are. So I have a belief. You have to work hard to make a lot of money. And then I either align with that belief and figure out how to work really hard, or I align in another way, which is great. I'm going to figure out how to be okay not having much money. there's a whole bunch of other stuff that might happen in there. Like I might not give money to people that don't work hard. If people beg for money, I'm like, fuck you. I worked hard for my money. I'm not going to give you any of my money. You might become very um, hardened against the notion of charity because it's counter to your beliefs. You don't get money without working hard. I worked hard to make this money. You could have this money too if you were willing to work hard. So there's all this set of actions that arises out of our belief. Those actions we take leads us to the third component of a context, which is the world around us that we create. This is the physical reality that's a reflection and an alignment with the actions we take. So if I work really hard to make a bunch of money and get myself into those kind of jobs, I'm going to look around me in my life, and the environment that I've created is consistent with my belief. I'm going to see a bunch of other people working hard to make a lot of money. And they're going to be in agreement with my belief that if you don't work hard, you don't deserve money. So now what happens is that world around us reinforces and is consistent with the belief that we started with. So now that's why I don't relate to my belief as a belief. I relate to it as the way the world is. That's just the way the world is. So if you were to tell me, Adam, it's just a story. It's just you could work hard for a lot of money. You could have a different story that you could make a lot of money not working hard. I would say, I'd slap you in the face with a glove and I'd say, how dare you, sir? Look around me. There's people here working really hard. All of the jobs that I've found that pay really well require you to work really hard. And further, my cognitive blind spot is going to filter out the exceptions to that rule or relate to them as rare, mystical, unicorn-like exceptions as opposed to the general reality. The general reality is a function of the world I've created by virtue of the actions I take, by virtue of the beliefs I have. And that world around me reinforces my beliefs. So this is my context, this whole system. From our context arises the content of the kind of questions we ask. So let's imagine that I have a context that starts with, I'm ugly. I'm ugly and people don't find me attractive. From there, I'm going to take a bunch of action, and let's add a second belief into that. Attractive people only want to date attractive people. So now I've got two beliefs. I'm going to take a bunch of actions. I'm not going to bother asking out attractive people. Or if I do, the way I'm going to ask them out would kind of be like apologetically, or like I already know they're not. I'm going to ask them out like it's the booby prize. That's who I'm going to be as I come to them. I'm not going to show up confident and be like, hey, gorgeous person, would you like to date me? I'm on offer. Instead, I'm going to be like, hey, I know you get a lot of offers, and I know I'm not the most attractive guy, but I'm really cool and funny. Would you like to have a date with me? That's going to be the way that I act consistent with my beliefs. And then what that's going to do is create an experience in a world around me where I'm surrounded by people that agree with that belief, people that fit into that belief, et cetera, et cetera. So can someone in the chat just say, hey, this is making sense, you're following along? Because it's kind of a bit of a thick concept. So I just want to make sure that I haven't lost anyone before I go to how our content arises from that. And then we'll talk about Andrew's question and how this pertains to leadership and coaching and all the good stuff that we're here for. While I'm waiting for someone to give me a nod or a nope, totally lost, I just noticed I'm followed by 1,700 people on Facebook. Yes. We've hired a social media team, Bay and I, to grow our following, which I'll talk about in a bit here. But the thing that's cool to me is they're like, great, let's figure out how to get you more clients. We're like, not interested in trying to create more clients. We're oversubscribed as is, and that's not the concern. We're not worried about making more money. We want to have a larger impact. We want to put the transformational message further into the world, so that more people get the benefit of this conversation, because that's going to rise, it's going to lift the water, and then all boats rise as we do so. That's way cooler. So someone type yes. Yes, I'm following Adam. Oh my God, this is shattering my world. I can't believe the context I'm in. Maybe everyone's just like had their brain blown apart and that's what's happening. I know there's a delay too, so I'll just check where. I don't know where the live is. Hopefully you guys are following along. So I'll keep going. Hey Lee, I was thinking of you just the other day. Bay and I were out in Souk over the course of the start of this week, and we went by Souk Oceanside Brewery, and I remember you posting a photo of their really good beers. We ended up. Turns out they didn't have a place to sit. I was sure that there was, so we ended up going to Cam. We ended up going to the other brewery. I think it's just called Souk Brewery, and having some really good beers there. Okay, great, Cam. Picking up your brain pieces. Well, let's build on what we've created. So we have a context now, which is made up of our beliefs, the actions we take from those beliefs, and the environment around us that creates. That is the water you swim in. And just like a fish in the ocean, there's nowhere where there isn't water. So there's not like a little bubble floating in the ocean filled with air where the fish can be like, holy shit, things are different. That's not how that works. Your context is completely internally consistent. There's no room really for anything other than an exception, which instantly evaporates. That's just an exception. That person won the lottery. That's why they have money without working hard. The chances of doing that are 1 in a billion. Fuck it. Okay. So remember, we drew out that context. I'm ugly. Attractive people want to date attractive people. I'm going to start asking people out from that, or other actions I might take is I'm going to figure out how to be okay with dating someone I'm not really attracted to, or I'm going to figure out how to be okay with blah, blah, blah. And then that creates a world around us consistent with that. So someone wanting a different kind of result in their life is going to naturally bring a question for support arising outside of that context. What that means is that they're going to ask a question like, let me just think of one here. So hard for me to figure out what would it be like to be unattractive. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see. So they might ask something like, Adam, how do I convince someone I find attractive to go out with me? So that in itself, right? If you just listen to that question, how do I convince someone I find attractive to go out with me? That's the question they might want support with. That arises out of their context, that already before they start, this person's not going to want to go out with them. So they're kind of like asking a question, given that I'm on the back foot, how do I then achieve a particular result? And that's what we're all doing. We're all asking these sort of questions that arise out of the water that we swim in. They can't see that. It doesn't occur to them like, oh, I've got these beliefs and then these actions I take from these beliefs and that creates a world around me. And then I don't see that world. It's all unconscious. And that's why I'm asking this question. I'll just ask a better question. It's not how it goes. We can't see any of it. It's all transparent to us. Just like for a fish, water is utterly transparent. They have no capacity to see water. So content is the actual question, the kind of support we look for, the kind of books we read, the kind of answers we seek, and it all arises out of our context. And from our context, those questions just keep us in it. So I could help someone figure out the best way to convince someone to go out with them. And then wow, now I can do it. I can convince people to go out with me. But that is still a function of the underlying belief that an attractive person won't want to go out with them. And so no matter how successful they are, they're going to convince this person to go out with them. But in the back of the mind, they know, I've convinced this person to go out with me. This person's married to me, but how can I trust that they actually really want me? They don't want to be with me. And every time they see Joe Hot Nuts walk by, Joe Hot Nuts is the most gorgeous guy in the world. Joe Hot Nuts walks by, this person's going to feel a deep level of insecurity because whilst they managed to bag a hottie, so to speak, it's still inside that underlying belief structure that this person doesn't really want to be with me. And so even though they create a particular result, it's going to clash with their underlying belief. And so they don't get the experience of life they're craving. They get the result without the underlying experience, which is like, oh my God, what if you could be with an attractive person and you knew that in the bottom of your heart, without any doubt, that they were madly in love with you and found you unbelievably attractive? that would be a radically different experience, and one that is not currently available inside this context we've drawn out. Oh, that's cool, Lydia. So we've got the context. The context determines the kind of questions you ask, the kind of support you seek, the kind of results you try to make happen. You can see this everywhere. As I've been getting into what's called Build a Second Brain, that's this program I've been using called Roam to capture a lot of thoughts. That's really, on Twitter, there's a lot of people that love this notion of building a second brain, offloading your memory into a second program, basically. And so I've been following really, really, really smart people that are engaged in this process. And because they're on Twitter, they share more than just their process through using an application like Roam. They share a lot of their thoughts about what they're doing in life, what they're making happen, all of which arises from their context. This doesn't mean that you can't create cool results inside your existing worldview. It doesn't mean a fish can't create an amazing life while confined to the ocean. It just means that any result, any experience of life that lies outside of the ocean will be completely unreachable for that fish. Doesn't mean, though, that the ocean itself has to be a miserable place. There's nothing available. So now we've laid out all this groundwork. So we're clear. We've got a context, which is the water you swim in, and then we have the content of what you ask for, what you seek, the solutions you try to enact, all of that stuff. Now we can come back to Andrew's question. He says, how do I recognize when the context I'm hearing might be off the mark? So Andrew, I know, is working in coaching and leadership development. In doing so, when you're developing leadership, what most people do is a direct report or someone is struggling with someone, they come to their leader and they ask for support. They ask for support with the content that they bring. Oh, help me convince this person to be attractive, or whatever. And then the leader, typically, because most people don't have any training in this art, they answer inside the same context. So it's like a fish coming to another fish for support, and then that other fish just helps them be better inside the ocean, as opposed to something truly transformational. In order to create transformation, the first step is we have to help the fish see the water they swim in. So that's what Andrew's talking about. Andrew's training his ability to hear past the content to the context underneath. What is the water this person swims in that's going to dictate how things go from here, whether or not I answer this question for them? So here's the answer, Andrew. You're asking kind of like, how do I get better at recognizing this? So the first part is you practice. We spend a tremendous amount of time on this in the Forge because this is the heart of transformation. First, helping people understand what this is. Second, helping them start to hear it and listen for it. And three, to actually start to point to it for people in a way that doesn't just show up as frustrating. Because if you come to someone, you're like, help me convince someone beautiful to love me. And then the person's like, well, you just believe you're unlovable. That can be obnoxious. So there's an art to bringing this to the world. So one, we practice with it a lot, Andrew, but more importantly, you can check it out over there with the other person. You can ask questions rather than saying, here's the context, rather than telling someone about the water they swim in. You can ask them questions that help them elaborate on that water and help them start to see that water and that co-create that with you. So if someone was like, help me convince, let's just work with that example we've come up with. Help me convince a beautiful person to go out with an ugly person like me. The first question I might ask is like, I'm just actually being with that question I've asked now. That's why I'm kind of thinking about it. Well, okay, so it sounds like you've decided you're ugly. Do I have that part right? Yeah. Well, I know I'm ugly. Like, I know I'm not attractive. So I might be like, oh, okay. Well, we'll come to your question. But before we do, like, tell me more about that. I'm going to start to get curious about this story this person has that they're ugly. Well, blah, 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 and this and that. And they're going to just start to describe it. Like, oh, okay. Well, and so tell me what, like, given you've concluded you're ugly, tell me what else is true about that. Well, first of all, beautiful people don't want to go out with ugly people. Okay. All right. Do ugly people? Well, they know they're ugly, so then they're willing to settle and blah, blah, blah. Okay, got it. Okay. And so I'm just going to start to ask questions that have them share about the water they swim in. Rather than jump straight to answering the question that they've brought, help me convince someone to blah, 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 I'm going to ask them questions that help me learn more and explore their context with them. And as I do so, they're going to start to see more of it. Oh, wow. Yeah, I start from the story that I'm ugly and then that no one wants to date an ugly person. So of course I'm looking to create that. Okay, got it. And then from there, I might start to be like, okay, so, well, what if we do answer that question? Like, how is that going to go given everything else you've just shared? And now what's happening is they're starting to see that inside the water they swim in, there cannot be anything different. Well, I guess I'd convince the person to go out with me, but I'd probably be constantly worried that they were just doing it out of pity or sympathy or empathy or, maybe on a bet and that it's just going to be a matter of time. Huh. And what would happen then? Well, I'd probably dump them before they could dump me, or I'd protect my heart so I couldn't really be with them, which would probably then have them leave. Or I'd be insanely jealous because I know it's just a matter of time. Wow. So what's the best it gets inside this? Well, I guess that I convinced someone to go out with me for a while, but then it inevitably ends. Huh. Was that what you want? So we're exploring the water they swim in and then checking to see if they actually want, like, we're exploring the water they swim in, and then we're exploring what's possible inside the water you swim in, inside your context. And from there, we can build, we can ask questions, and now they can start to see the water that they're swimming in, and then you can support them to create something different if they want to. So that's what I would be doing, Andrew, is like, listen for what you think you hear, so that that's in the back of your mind. You're kind of like, okay, I think this is there, but then ask questions that support your client to distinguish this. Ask questions from curiosity, so you can start to learn about the underlying context that's at play. This is the art of all transformational coaching and leadership. What we've just described over the last half hour is the heart of it. And it's why it just gets missed all the time. It's why most leadership and most coaching calls itself transformational, but it's really just transactional, is because it's it's fish inside of the ocean, teaching other fish how to really be great inside of the ocean, which is fine if you want to be an awesome fish. But if you want to walk on land or fly in the air, you need support from people that are outside of the ocean, that have had someone else help them see beyond the confines of the ocean they're in, and then so on and so forth. So that's what you do, Andrew. Okay, you guys are really quiet in the chat here. Oh, we're losing, viewers are dropping off like flies too. We're down to 5. Boring subject matter for today, Adam. Let's see what we'll talk about next. Talk about something spicy, something muy caliente. Let's talk about empaths versus Vulcans. That'll be fun. And with such low viewers, it's a good time to talk about this, because this often, I get a lot of pushback from this. So we're all familiar with empaths. Empaths are people who just feel other people. That's the Italians, feely culture, a grappa giusta. That's what Bay and I call champagne. So empaths are people that like feel other people. And if you've spent any time on Facebook, you might have seen people that self-identify as empaths posting empowered memes about this, that, and the other thing, about being an empath and what it is and all of that. So empaths, you could almost say they feel too much or have learned to feel too much. They feel beyond the boundaries of themselves into other people. Vulcans would be people on the other side of the equation. This is just a term I made up, but I think it's kind of cool, and I love Star Trek and Live Long and Prosper and all of that sort of stuff. So Vulcans would be people that feel, it's not that they feel too little, they've just trained themselves to feel very little. So Vulcans almost feel less than is actually there for them to feel, and that allows them to operate really effectively from the realm of logic, their mind. They're very good at being up in their mind. Now, as a starting point, I'm going to assert that the birthright of every human being is to feel fully. So what that means is not that someone is born naturally empathic, naturally feeling beyond themselves, or that someone is born naturally feeling less than the fullness of what there is for them to feel. Those are trained tendencies. That is habitual. They've learned that. So oftentimes people who were raised by alcoholic parents, for example, grow up to be very empathic. And the reason for that is that they had to, as a matter of survival, learn to really feel the nuance in their parents to see, like, is this going to be a good night or a bad night? Is my parent coming home drunk? And if so, do I need to really be on good behavior so that I don't upset them? Because if I upset them, something bad happens. So they start to feel, they train their ability unconsciously to feel more, 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 more. Vulcans tend to be people where what they learn is that feelings get in the way. What you need to do is what you need to do, and you need to be successful, and you need to do good in school. But I don't feel like doing that. Doesn't matter. You need to be good in school. And so what they learn to do is narrow their focus, narrow it down, compress their feelings so that you could think of like their feeling body is like, 4 inches shorter, whereas an empath is like 4 inches larger. Neither of these is good or bad. Being an empath is not good or bad. It's just what you've learned to do. Being a Vulcan is not good or bad. It's just what you've learned to do. Both of these ways of these trained habitual ways of being afford different pros and cons. Being an empath, you can feel into other people more. So you can be a little more aware of what's going on in the conversation. You can be a little more connected with people. You can kind of like get a sense when someone wants to leave and sort of acknowledge that and work with that a little bit better, so on and so forth. Being a Vulcan, you can reduce the emotionality from whatever you're currently trying to do so you can make the best logical decision. So think of like a judge or a doctor, right? Doctor got to make a really challenging decision in the moment. Logically, what is the best decision to do? A few more parts on this before we start to get a little further. Being a Vulcan does not mean you have a small heart. In fact, often people with very large hearts end up Vulcanized because you learn that all of what you feel is a liability, and so you learn to close it down. So it's important that we not say like people who are empathic have bigger hearts naturally than Vulcans. I wouldn't say that's true at all. So if you talk to like the common story about an empath that they hold about themselves is often, I feel what you over there can't feel. Especially if you have an empath and a Vulcan together, the Vulcan is remember there it's like the 4-inch narrower emotional body. They feel often they're not even aware of what they feel because they've gotten so good at shrinking it. So when you bring a Vulcan together with an empath, the empath's going to feel sometimes more than that Vulcan will feel. They'll feel stuff that the Vulcan's not even aware they'll feel. And so this is a common, we'll call it refrain from people that identify as an empath. I'm feeling for you what you aren't able to feel for you. Amazing. What a gift, right? Whereas the Vulcan can kind of like support the empath in a way by like removing emotion from the conversation. Often people who describe as empathic are just swept away in their emotions and their feelings. Whereas the Vulcan can kind of like feet on the ground. This is what there is for us to do. I understand you're worried. I know you're feeling maybe even more worried than you're aware. This is what we're going to do. It's just kind of a balance when you bring these two people together, right? 4 inches wider than their natural self, 4 inches smaller than their natural self. That creates wholeness to some extent. So Vulcans tend to get a lot of false negatives, meaning it's like their antenna's undertuned. So there's signal coming through, but the Vulcan doesn't pick up on it. Someone may be feeling something and the Vulcan's unaware of it. They may be feeling something and the Vulcan's unaware of it. The other side to this is that the empath has a lot of false positives. Their antenna's overtuned. So they can pick up on noise and mistake that for the signal. They might feel something internally and be like, oh, I'm feeling your anxiety. And the other person may be like, I'm not feeling anxious. You're feeling anxious. You're just not aware of it. I'm picking up on it. And so that's where empaths run into problems, is because the first stage for people who are empathic is to own that they are empathic. That's often a breakthrough just there to be like, oh, I feel more than most people do. The second stage is then to move beyond being right about everything they feel. Yeah, you feel more than most people do. And sometimes you're confabulating what you're feeling. Sometimes you're attributing a signal to mere noise. And so this is where empaths then start to run into trouble because they are insistent. No, you're angry. I feel it. And the person's like, well, I'm starting to get angry because it's annoying when someone keeps insisting I'm feeling something and I'm not, and I'd rather you trust me. And then there's no winning there because the empaths decided that they're right about it. And so this speaks a little bit to what Andrew's describing earlier, which is like he sort of is like, oh, I see a thing over there. But what we ultimately have to do in relationship is like, okay, I feel something that I think is there for you, but you're telling me it's not. And so I have to be willing to trust that. And where we get tangled in relationships is when often when you have like an empath and a Vulcan, that's how Bay and I both learned to become. We've both done work based on work to like not attribute so much truth to what she feels. Yeah, she's feeling something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true that it's mine, that I'm even feeling it. It just means she's feeling it. And I've done a lot of work to actually feel what's there to be felt, as opposed to just be a complete Vulcan and operate entirely from my brain. No, there's nothing here for us to feel. And further, if there was, it's a bunch of fucking bullshit, so don't feel it. But a lot of that work required us kind of being in the dance of that tension, whereas me being willing to feel more than I was necessarily comfortable, and Bay being willing to let go of being right about what she feels and instead just feel it. So that's often the breakthrough for empaths is a willingness on their part to let go of the meaning they make around what they're feeling and instead just feel it. Oh, I feel this, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety in your presence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's your anxiety or even my anxiety or whatever. That's where emotions and feelings start to really set us free, is when we can allow ourselves to simply feel them without having to create a bunch of meaning around them. And as we do that, it takes us out of the realm of our head. Why do I feel this way? And instead, oh, I feel sad. So what there is to do right now is be sad. In time, that'll be replaced by a new feeling, and then I will feel that one. This releases a lot of suffering, a lot of headaches, a lot of anxiety. Okay. Okay, let's talk about generating momentum as an entrepreneur, and I think we're going to wind down there. We're a little quiet today, so that's always a good indicator that it's a good time to wind down. So David asks about generating momentum as an entrepreneur, and in classic David fashion, doesn't give me much more than that. So let's talk about some of the stuff that I found works for me to generate momentum, as well as where I struggle to create momentum. And then we'll kind of end our conversation there today. So let's see, where we're going to start is your corporate job. The nice thing about a corporate job, and when I say a corporate job, I mean it doesn't have to be a corporate job. It could be working at a grocery store. It could be working at the candy shop down the lane, whatever. When you're working for someone else, you don't have to generate your own discipline. Discipline is imposed upon you. So what that means is like, show up to work on time, or we're going to give you a demerit and we'll write you up. Get 3 moments, get written up 3 times, we're going to fire you. So you don't have much choice. There's not a lot of freedom in that. Show up on time or you're fired. That's the way it works. So there's no need for you to generate discipline. Again, it's imposed upon you. And so when people are working in a corporate job, they experience 2 things here. First, they experience themselves kind of just doing their job up to the point required by the discipline imposed. So even if you hate your job, and there's like, Bay used to work in the government, and in the government, one of the things she often heard, this is not all government employees, I have friends that are really empowered around their jobs in the government, but in the public sector, there's a lot of people that talk about pensionable time and putting in the hours. So what they're saying, what they mean when they say that is, every hour they spend in the government leads to more money in their pension, which they will then get when they retire. That is not that's not sort of like my job rules and I'm stoked to be here. It means I'm here doing what I have to do because that will get me something when I'm finished being here. So it's kind of like working for the weekend, but you're working for your retirement, which is not a it's not a very empowering way to experience 40 years of your career in life. All the same, that's how it goes. So you get people that are like, all right, I'm just here for my pensionable time, for my, I got to put in the hours. What these people will do, first of all, they don't want to be there. They want to be retired. They're there so that they're here so they can get there. Second, let's have some tea. If you took away all the structure, those people would not be at that job. If they could have the pensionable time without having to be at work, they would do that almost certainly. They have no other motivation to be at work other than that, largely. There might be moments where they enjoy their work, but like what they share belies the truth of how they experience their job and all of that. And yet they show up to work and they do stuff. These people don't just sit at their desk, leaning back, waiting for money to fall into their laps. They take action. They do stuff. They move things forward. That is because the structure provided by their corporate job imposes a degree of discipline, which then has them take action. So they simultaneously move forward because of that, but they also experience a lack of freedom because they have to do it. They don't have any choice in the matter. If they want that pension, if they want that carrot dangled in front of their face, they got to walk towards it. That's how that goes. And so the discipline imposed on them has them do work, but it also has them feel like they have a lack of freedom, which is often not the most empowering experience. When you leave a corporate job and become an entrepreneur, all of that structure and discipline that's imposed upon you is replaced with a tremendous amount of freedom. There's absolutely no one that will force you to do anything. No one's going to force you to get up and write emails. No one's going to force you to publish content. No one's going to force you to do anything at all. Instead, all there is you. You can spend the next 4 months doing nothing, wearing down your savings, talking about how tomorrow you're going to do the scary thing, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, until you used up all your savings, and then you can return to your corporate job. Be like, I tried everything and it didn't work, or I just couldn't make it happen. That's part of the challenge of being an entrepreneur. So one of the things we don't realize we're giving up when we go from a corporate structure to a full-time coach, a full-time entrepreneur, a startup founder, whatever, is all of the discipline that was it was imposed on us, which is going to be inherently disempowering, but we also didn't have to generate it. We didn't have to be the ones to create that. That was just put on us. So we were forced to move forward. There's a tangential point I want to make here. Let me just see if I can remember it. Leave your job, freedom. Yes. In the intersection of this, what often happens is people working a corporate job then use that job as the reason why they can't put any time into their entrepreneurial venture. I've got my corporate job. I'm exhausted. It's too tiring. I don't want to work at the end of the day. So in order to do what I want to do as an entrepreneur, I have to stop doing this. So it's very all or nothing. And that kind of is the setup of this. What's really happening, it's not to say you won't be exhausted, but you're going to always have an excuse. Why not do what's scary as an entrepreneur? Like if what you wanted to do, for example, is be a coach, you're always going to have a reason, an excuse why today is not the day to put yourself out there. Why today is not the day to create some connection with people that you don't yet know. Why today is not the day yet to invite someone into a coaching conversation. The corporate job just provides a really convenient structure for you to put in the way of what you say you want. So it's often the people that are insistent they can't yet do it, but once they leave their job, then they're going to really lean into it. These are the people that typically fail once they leave their corporate job. The people that I succeed most often are the ones that are like, they're in a corporate job and they're like, fuck it. I want it like they're taking their fear on now, right here today, rather than once they no longer have a big corporation stopping them from doing it because they're so exhausted. So that doesn't have to look like a big step. That can look like 1 hour a week that you spend doing something, but 1 hour more than you're currently spending. For me, when I started out, I was practicing law, which is about nine hours every day, 5 days a week. I was pretty fortunate. Most of my colleagues in cohort were doing much bigger hours, much longer. I was doing about 45 hours a week, sometimes upwards of 50-ish. And then I'd walk home, I'd eat dinner quickly, and then I would get on the phone or I would send out emails or I would message people. There's not a lot of time for video games or watching TV. I was coaching in the evenings because I was really committed to making this work, and I was really clear that I did not want to practice law. I wanted to create something different. So I had some hunger in me. You don't have to do it the way I did. You don't have to work 12 hours a day, 3 of which are doing what you love, and 9 of which are doing something that you're pretty good at and don't hate, but isn't really what you want to do. But you need to do something. And ultimately, what has to happen is we have to generate some momentum ourselves. The fact that on your off hours, if you're one of these people I just described, where on your off hours you're too exhausted to do anything, well, you're going to have to, that's just an excuse. You're going to have to generate some kind of energy to get into action. We don't like this. We don't like this because it forces our hand. We have to actually show up and play now, before, rather than waiting for something to happen and then saying, oh, I'm going to do the stuff. So that's the first thing about generating momentum. Start taking the action towards what you want today, as opposed to once something changes and shifts and blah, 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 blah. So once you're actually an entrepreneur, once you've left behind, you've kicked off, you've pushed away from the shore, from the dock, and you're on the boat boldly going into whatever, this is the place where, in the coaching world at least, quite ironically, people tend to, once they've done this, coaches are like, well, I'm not going to hire a coach because I've, the runway is very short, so I can't afford that. I'll afford that once I'm a little more established. That's so backwards to the whole profession that they're operating in. It can't work. And if it does, it ends up creating this kludgy mess for them. And those people end up usually going back to whatever they're doing. It can't work because the whole premise of coaching is that you're going to have someone support you to create what you're otherwise unwilling and unable to create yourself. And so part of the gift that brings to us as entrepreneurs is the opportunity to see the stuff we keep putting off and to not keep putting it off, to actually get into action around it and to get support and structure that allows us to start like taking this shit on. I'm going to do it today rather than next week plus 10 years. What else has supported me in creating momentum myself? I'm just going to give some quick examples. I think we're going to wind down because most of what I want to say about this has already been said now. Any kind of structure that supports you to get into action. So some of those structures are like designing a project, to-do lists. These are just structures. They take it out of your mind and put it onto paper where you can look at it and stare at it. Accountability partners, hours of power, where you meet every morning at some time with people and get into conversation with them. When I first started out, every Friday morning, like the first week and for the first year, I think, after I left law, so now I had a full day in front of me, every Friday morning I'd get up at, I think, 5:30. This was before I was an early riser. But for this, every Friday I'd get up at 5:30 and I'd go and I'd meet my friends, 2 of which worked downtown near where I was living. We'd meet for breakfast. Now I had no money, so I ate breakfast at home and then I just drink decaf coffee while they ate a good breakfast that looked delicious. But that was a structure that supported me because I started my day off meeting with 2 other people that were going to their jobs. And then after I finished, I went home and I went to my job and I got into action and I did what there was to do, as opposed to sleeping until 11 a.m. because I deserve it and I need to make sure my well-being is set and blah, blah, blah. So these are just examples of structure that can support us to continue momentum. The best thing I think that works for people is to let go of trying to do it on our own. When we try to do it on our own, what tends to happen is we get really inspired. We get really, hell yeah, I'm going to do this. and then we get into a lot of action, and then the pendulum swings to the other side where we are like, fuck it, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm not going to take any action. Then we hang out there for 2 weeks, and then we swing all the way to the other side. Fuck it, I'm going to get into action. I can't bear not to be in action. And we do that for 2 weeks, and that just becomes the pendulum. On average, you're creating, I guess, like 50% level of action the whole way through, or maybe 100%, because 200% action when you're in it, and then 0% when you're not. So I guess that averages out to 100%. But the trouble is that often what creates better results is consistency, as opposed to like a spike and then a trough, and then a spike and a trough. And even if it created the same results, my experience supporting and working with people that do this up, down, is that they tend to feel manic, and then they tend to feel quite bipolar, like really up and high and holy fuck, everything's going to change, and then depressed and sad. And so even if they are creating results, which tends not to be the case as much, they're doing so amidst creating an experience for themselves in life that's not particularly empowering. And it tends to be exhausting and tiresome, and like being a cork bobbing on the ocean rather than a boat moving consistently along a direction towards something in particular. Let's look in this magic box here and see if there's anything else that I want to say about this particular piece before we wind down. The some of our audience are coaches, and so often coaches want to know, like, what made a difference for you, Adam? What allowed you as an entrepreneur to succeed where others haven't? Not because I'm necessarily exceptional, although I guess succeeding in this profession is kind of exceptional. And the answer to that is super simple, and it's the one most coaches are most resistant to, which is I made working with my own coach a non-negotiable right from the start. From the very first day, forever forward, my budget had hiring a coach in it, which is not the way most people relate to their own development. The way most people relate to their own development is, once I get here, then I'll invest a little bit in myself, and then I'll do that for a year, and then I'll stop, and then I'll come back to it, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's totally fine. But in a profession where I have to be continually progressing and growing, that investment seems just so clearly an always on for me. That doesn't have to be what allows you to thrive the most, but that by and far, and without any doubt in my mind, is the thing that's allowed me to thrive and what I'm up to. Okay, well, enough of that. Any updates on the Forge, Adam? I think we're pretty much in the same place as last time. We've got 4 spots left. We're in conversation, it looks like, with about 6 people. If you're kind of wanting to deepen yourself, if you want to learn the art of transformation, not intellectually, which is often, like, sometimes people say, oh, it sounds a lot like Landmark. Landmark is an ontological process. Landmark Forum is the most familiar type of landmark that people know. Turns out I've got one more thing to say. I'm going to distinguish Landmark from what we're doing in the Forge. So first of all, if you've not done Landmark, it's a brilliant program. Landmark Forum is a large group. I can't remember the numbers, something like 100 or greater. It's a lot of people, led by people through a particular curriculum over the course of 2 weekends. And there's a lot of breakthroughs that can happen through that process. Big, big, big shifts. And they give you a lot of new language, which can often be quite jargony at first, especially if you're talking to someone, we call them land Martians, because they can get a little weird and everything, they'll start to say things like, I had a headache, but then I realized a headache's just a conversation that I was in with myself. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Your head hurts. So they get a little weird. But what I find happens with structures like Landmark, and indeed like ayahuasca as well, and other sort of Tony Robbins events, stuff like that, is that people go away, they get a bunch of new language, they get some peak experiences, and then they go away. So they kind of come up like this, they have like a bunch of awareness, but then changing your awareness is like seeing the beliefs that you have. Remember, we were talking about beliefs, actions, and environment. So it's like, oh my God, my beliefs, you can see them. Then they come back home and they might put into action some new actions for a while, but the environment hasn't shifted. And with no ongoing support, that environment is a juggernaut. Trying to move it, trying to show up differently in the face of a world that you've trained to relate to a certain way, you just get pushed back by the environment into that old shape. And so what then ends up happening with a lot of people that I get into relationship with who have a background in landmark is they have a whole bunch of language to talk very sophisticated about a lot of stuff. And it's not that it's doing them no good, but it's also that they get to a certain point, but then they're kind of stuck there. And that's why the structure of the Forge is deep, immersive, and ongoing. It's 9 months, and you're meeting almost every week, and you're getting supported throughout that, so that you don't just have a peak level of experience and then come back home and try to implement it yourself. You're in constant practice, showing up differently from new awareness outside of the water you've learned to swim in the face of a world trying to push you back, and then getting supported to stand firm in the new world you're trying to create. And as you do that, while the world initially tries to push you back, slowly it starts to shift around you. So yeah, there's some similarities, but I believe a structure like this one supports people much more powerfully to create deep, lasting transformation. Now, it costs way more. The Forge is a $8,000 program for 9 months. Landmark is like $300 for 2 weekends. So it's not to say one is better than the other, but often sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, oh, it sounds like Landmark. Well, I've got that under my belt, so I feel pretty good in that realm. And it's totally cool if that's what they're after. But this is something much deeper. And what we're aiming to do is create transformation for you in a way that doesn't exist in your head, which is how I find a lot of people that do a lot of Landmark or even go to a lot of Tony Robbins events, is a lot of this stuff lives in their head as opposed to becoming embodied in the marrow of their bones, such that they don't have to figure out how to use it or intellectualize this stuff. It's like riding a bike. At no point do you hop on a bike and then go, okay, now what do I have to do? I got to turn a little bit left, but I'll mostly be unconscious of that, which will lean me towards the right. And then I turn into the turn. That's how I do that. And then I got to pedal. And then how's this balance? That just doesn't happen as you ride a bike. So we're getting you beyond the pale, beyond the realm of that. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're feeling called to a deeper level of transformation in your own life, reach out to us, reach out to me, send Bay a message, drop a link in a message in the comments. Let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you about that. Andrew saying, hey, Andrew, I'm seeing the benefits of that one-on-one coaching. It's been 6 months now and I'm starting to hit points where I don't have the answer. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, right? There's, it's profound work. And the other nice thing about investing in your own coach and making that a non-negotiable is it becomes so easy to enroll other people in that work. A lot of coaches are reserving the right, so to speak, to not hire their own coach, and then are frustrated because it's so hard to enroll clients in working with them. And then what they do is they hire not a coach. They hire someone that calls themselves a business or a marketing coach, which is not a coach, not a transformational one, to help them do more marketing, and then don't understand why that doesn't seem to make the difference. And it's all because it's layered on top of what's not working. So really what I find sets people free is when they start to, one, as a non-negotiable, invest in their own coach. And as they do that, they start to experience transformation in their lives. So for me, through the work I get to do with my coach, Rachel, enrolling people in this work is so easy because all I have to do is get curious about what they want in their life. And a lot of coaches earlier on are like, well, I don't know if I can actually help them get that. I know, hell yeah. With coaching, absolutely you can create what you want. It's made a profound difference in my life. Like that, if you were to ask me, Adam, what's the best decision you've ever made in your life? That's it. So it's so easy to stand for that possibility. The possibility for someone saying yes to a coach, whether it's me or someone else, is a no-brainer because I've had the direct experience of that possibility in my own life. And when we create the direct experience in our own life, there's nothing, we don't have to convince people of anything. We can be at peace with it and be like, look, this is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. It's completely transformed my life. I think it would transform your life too, but it doesn't mean you have to take it. But If you want to know how it's made my life better, and if you want to get curious and take a look to see what possibility could erupt into your life, if you were to make this same kind of investment and relate to your own development as like the bedrock for everything else that happened beyond that, hey, I'm down to have a conversation with you for that. That becomes really fun. Enrollment stops being like, fuck, how do I get this person? And instead, it just becomes an invitation to them that they can say yes or no to, just like giving someone a gift. Okay. That feels like a good place for us to wind down today. It's been a really good vacation for me. I hope you guys are starting to get ready for summer. We in British Columbia, which is the westernmost province of Canada, are just about to have a heat dome apparently over top of us, which I believe is I think it's a level 5 spell cast by an ancient wizened wizard. Wizened means kind of wrinkly. And what a heat dome does is it like somehow stops air currents from circulating and keeps the air really hot. And so temperatures are going to get hot. For those of you in Celsius, Lake Cowichan, which is a little bit north of the island from where I live, is forecast to get up to, I think, 36 degrees Celsius, which, in some parts of the States and certainly some parts of Europe, would be like, whatever, that's no big deal. But for us down here, that's like almost twice what we're used to seeing. That's like friggin' hot. So I hope you guys are planning to go out and do something nice for this warm weekend ahead of us and the week following. And we'll see you next Friday back with our regular live shows, which will be identical to the live shows that you've been seeing during this time off, but they'll be called regular instead of vacation lives. All right. See you guys later. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.